Right, we're from 1 Samuel chapter 15 today, and we're talking about judgment delayed. Let's look at verse 1 for a moment. Then Samuel said to Saul, "The Lord sent me to anoint you as king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore listen to the words of the Lord." So Samuel is saying to Saul, God anointed you to be king, not to be king for your own enjoyment, but I have work for you to do. And he says, the job that I have for you to do is to go and to wipe out Amalek. The reason I say this, sometimes people think that now that I'm a Christian, I pretty well live the Christian life the way I want to live it. Not that I'm under the lordship of Christ, not the idea, Lord, what do you want me to do? We're really Christians when we're come to the place, Jesus, what am I to do next? How am I to please you? And so God says, Saul, I want you to go and wipe out the Amalek. Now, I want us to look at several scriptures to bring us up to date about Amalek. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 17 and find out who these people are that God wants every man, woman, child, and all of their donkeys destroyed. So let's see if we can find out who they are. Exodus 17, we begin with verse 8. Now the children of Israel are in the desert. They have not gone into the land of Canaan yet. And so while they're in the desert, let's see what happens. Exodus 17, verse 8. Then Amalek came and fought against Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, "Choose men for us and go out and fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." And Joshua did as Moses told him and fought against Amalek, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. So it came about when Moses held his hands up that Israel prevailed. And when he let his hands down, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy. Then they took a stone, put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side, one on the other side. Thus his hands were steady until the sun set. So Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this in a book as a memorial, and recite it to Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under you." And Moses built an altar and named it, "The Lord is my banner." And he said, "The Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation." Right, so he says here that I will utterly destroy the nation of Amalek. And then he turns around and says, "But you will have war from generation to generation." So what do we see here? We see that judgment will come on Amalek, but the judgment will be delayed. It did not happen the day that Joshua went out and fought. He had victory that day, but God says, you're going to fight these people again and again and again. All right, let's continue to follow the story. Let's go to Deuteronomy 25. Deuteronomy 25, we will read 17 through 19. Remember what Amalek did to you along the way when you came out from Egypt, how he met you along the way and attacked among you all the stragglers at your rear when you were faint and weary, and he did not fear God. Therefore it shall come about, when the Lord your God has given you rest from all your surrounding enemies in the land which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance to possess, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. You must not forget. So at this point, this is after the battle. This is just before they're going into the land of Canaan. And he reminds them what Amalek did. He said, you were weary, you were poor, and some of the people were straggling. They were not able to keep up. And so they attacked the weak ones, the ones at the end of the line. He said, you are dealing with the people who does not fear God. Now this will play an important part, because we want to ask the question as we go along. Why does God say kill all the men, women, children, babies, and animals? This will play an important part. All right, let's continue to follow. Now we go back to 1 Samuel 15. And we see how this is developing. Now when we come to Samuel and Saul, this is over 300 years later when Joshua fought Amalek in the desert. So a long time has passed. Now God says in verse 3 of chapter 15, now go and strike Amalek, utterly destroy all that he has, and do not spare him, but put to death both man, woman, child, and infant, ox, sheep, camel, and donkeys. See, God had said this already twice, hundreds of years before that. And he said, you will have war with them from generation to generation. So over 300 years has passed. And he tells Saul, I want you to go and to attack them. All right, let's read verse 20 in the same chapter. Chapter 15 of 1 Samuel. Then Saul said to Samuel, I did obey the voice of the Lord. I went out on the mission on which the Lord sent me, and I have brought back Agag, the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. Now, is he telling the truth? Is he completely obeying the Lord? He's not. He's telling a half-truth. He did not utterly destroy. Now, let me explain what the word utterly destroy means, because it's used several times. And it talks about it, said they utterly destroyed. And then the next time they utterly destroyed. And then the next time it utterly destroyed. It means those that you got your hands on, you destroyed. But the entire race was not destroyed each time. Because you couldn't fight from generation to generation these people if they were wiped out with Joshua in the desert, or if they were wiped out with Saul. The ones that they had their hands on, you destroy them. That's what it means, utterly destroy. Now let's look at verse 32 and 33. Saul lied. He did not completely obey the Lord. He did not kill the king. The king's name was Agag. He spared him. And so he brings Agag to Samuel as a trophy. And let's see if Samuel accepts him as a trophy, or let's see how Samuel responds to him. Verse 32, 33. Then Samuel said, "Bring me Agag, the king of the Amalekites." And Agag came to him cheerfully. And Agag said, "Surely the bitterness of death is past." But Samuel said, "As your sword has made woman childless, so shall your mother be childless among women." And Samuel hewed Agag to pieces before the Lord at Gilgal. Now, who was faithful, completely faithful to God? Saul or Samuel? Samuel is an old man at this time, but he knows the command of God is to utterly destroy them, not capture them, but destroy them. So he did not compromise, and he did not say, "War is past, and we will forgive it, and we will go light." God said, "Kill him." So Samuel took a sword, and he killed the king in front of Saul. Now, let's go to chapter 30. You see, God said you'll have war from generation to generation. So let's follow this through. 1 Samuel 30. Verse 1. See, at this point, Saul is no longer king, and now we have David on the scene. Then it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, the Amalekites had made a raid on the Negev and on Ziklag, and had overthrown Ziklag and burned it with fire. Now, I did make a mistake. David is not king at this time. Saul is still king. He is fighting. And so David goes out on a raid, he and his men, because they had captured Ziklag. Now, Ziklag is where David's wives and family was living. So they captured David's family. So David goes to war after them. Now skip down to verse 17. And David slaughtered them from the twilight until the evening of the next day. And not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who rode on camels and fled. So you see, utterly destroyed does not mean every Amalekite. The ones they got their hands on, they destroyed. Now we have 400 men, or Amalekites, that escaped. So God is saying, you will have war with them from generation to generation. This was a powerful army. And here they have 400 camels. Now, let's go to 2 Samuel. Chapter 1. In 2 Samuel chapter 1, Saul and Jonathan have just been killed. And this is maybe the day after, I'm not sure. but not long after, a man came and he brought some news. And he came to David and he said, for 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 8, and he said to me, who are you? And I answered him, I am an Amalekite. And he said to me, please stand beside me and kill me, for agony has seized me, because my life still lingers in me. So on the battlefield, Saul is wounded but not dead. So an Amalekite walks up to him, and Saul begs him, he said, would you please kill me? Verse 10, so I stood beside him and killed him, because I knew that he could not live after he had fallen. And I took the crown which was on his head, and the bracelet which was on his arm, and I have brought them here to my Lord. So who killed Saul? An Amalekite. You see that? Verse 8. God told him to utterly destroy the Amalekites. He does not destroy all that he gets his hands on. One man escapes, and then when the Philistines go to battle against Saul, this Amalekite joins the Philistine army. And an Amalekite actually kills Saul. You see, God was not pleased because he only obeyed halfway. All right, we're at verse 11, 2 Samuel 1, verse 11. Then Samuel took hold of his clothes, tore them, and so also did all the men who were with him. They mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the people of the Lord and the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. And David said to the young man, that is the Amalekite, who told him, where are you from? And he answered, I am a son of an alien, an Amalekite. David said to him, how is it that you were not afraid to stretch out your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? David called one of the young men and said, go and cut him down. So he struck him and he died. Now why did David kill him? Because the instruction was, you are to utterly destroy them. The ones you can get your hands on, you kill them. You do not let them escape. So now David is king. So you see, time keeps elapsing from generation to generation. Now, let's go, as far as I know, the last time the Amalekites are found in the Bible. We will go to the book of Esther. Esther is just before the book of Job. Now, it is a long time from David to Esther. A real long time. At this time, Israel has been living in captivity under the rule of the Medes and the Persians. There is a man in office under the king. His name is Haman. And Haman hates the Jews with all that is within him. And so he has persuaded the king, Ahasuerus, that on a certain day all Jews in the country would be killed. And there's a law among the Medes and the Persians, a law cannot be changed. So the law is enforced. So here we have this man, and he's going to oversee the killing of every Jew in the country. All right, we're at chapter 8. We begin with verse 1. After these events, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and established his authority over all the princes who were with him. Now, who was the king that Samuel killed? Agag. Who is Haman? He's an Agagite. He is a descendant of the king of these people. So they're still around. This is even hundreds of years after Agag is killed. Now, let's read verse 7 of chapter 3. Well, let's go to chapter 8 of Esther. Chapter 8 of Esther, verse 3. Then Esther spoke again to the king, fell at his feet and wept, and implored him to avert the evil scheme of Haman the Agagite and his plot which he had devised against the Jews. There is only one person in all the earth that can save the Jews at this time. And it is Queen Esther, who is a Jew. So she pleads to the king that something be done to overrule Haman. Now, let's go down to verse 7. So King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given the house of Haman to Esther, and him they have hanged on the gallows, because he has stretched out his hand against the Jews. So because of Esther's influence, Haman, a descendant of Agag, is hung. Okay, I forgot to write the verse down. It's in this passage. And it says on the next day, you can read it and find it. It says on the next day, Haman had 10 sons. And Esther was not through wiping out this nation until every one of them was killed. And so Haman was killed one day, the next day his 10 sons are hung. And as far as I know, this is the end of this nation. Judgment came, judgment was delayed. It was hundreds of years before it all happened, but it did happen. You know, one place in the Bible, some mockers are saying, Jesus hasn't come yet. He's not coming. Just because he delays does not mean that he's not coming. The lake of fire has not been opened up yet, but it will be opened up. Judgment is coming, even though it will be delayed. Now, let's deal with this little subject here. Why does God want to kill all men, women, and children, infants, and animals? You remember I pointed out, it was in Deuteronomy, that these people did not fear God. God knew that these people would never turn to God. Never. One defeat after another, they keep on hating God and hating God's people. So, I want to go back to Deuteronomy go to Deuteronomy chapter 7, and we want to deal with answering this question: why does God want to completely destroy all, even the children? Deuteronomy chapter 7, let's read the first 8 verses. See, I wanted to give you a complete layout of who these people were and how they lived their lives. All right, we're at Deuteronomy 7. Let's read the first 8 verses. And in the book of Deuteronomy, it's Moses at the end of his life. It is the end of the 40 years in the wilderness, and he is giving them an overview of what has happened in the past 40 years, and he also is going to tell them what's going to happen when they cross the Jordan River and go into the land of Canaan. So here we go. Deuteronomy 7, verse 1. When the Lord your God shall bring you into the land where you are entering to possess it, and shall clear away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgazites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and stronger than you. And when the Lord your God shall deliver them before you, you shall defeat them. Then you shall utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, and show no favor to them. Furthermore, you shall not any marry with them. You shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor shall you take their daughters or your sons. For, or because, they will turn your sons away from following me, to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and he will quickly destroy you. But thus you shall do to them: you shall tear down their altars, smash their sacred pillars, hew down their Ashtoreths, burn their graven images with fire. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his own possession out of all the people who are on the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his love on you, nor choose you, because you were more in number than any of the people, but you were the fewest of all people. But because the Lord loved you and kept the oath which he swore to your forefathers, the Lord brought you out by a mighty hand, redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the house of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Now he said, I did all this and I'm going to do all of this, not because you are a special people. Sometimes we feel that we are special. When God saved us, there was nothing special about us. The Lord saved us because He loved us in spite of who we were. We were not lovable. We were not good and kind and compassionate. We were evil, but He loved us. All right, so why does God say kill all of them? Because He says it's on the basis that I love you. He was saying, if I turn you loose in a nation, it would be like throwing the children to wolves. God says, I have a special love for you, and I do not want you destroyed. So I want to clear out a place so that you can live holy unto the Lord. There's a verse in 1 Corinthians, it says this: bad company corrupts good morals. If good people hang around with bad people, it's going to corrupt them. You know, as we grow older and older, we cherish thoughts of our parents. I think I've told you this before. I remember when I was a teenager and I was getting ready to go out with my friends. This was the parting words of my mother when I went out the door, time after time. Jerry, bad company corrupts good morals. And it stuck. And it made a big influence on my life and the choices that I made with my friends. God says, I don't want to save you and then turn you over to a people that's going to destroy you. I want to give you a life where you and I can fellowship continuously. And He says, the only way I can do it is that I'm going to have to remove some people. Remember, it pointed out that these people hated God, hated God's people, and they was never going to change. Even the little ones, and the next generation, and the next generation, and then God knew that they was never going to change. And He was saying, I'm doing it for your good. There's another verse in the New Testament, and it says, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. Paul, in this passage, he is talking about there is an immoral man in the church. And Paul said, you need to put him out of the church, because if you don't, a little leaven is going to leaven the whole lump. Evil is going to spread. He said, I love you. I want you to keep yourself pure and clean. And we cannot let evil people openly exist in the church. All right, another thing God is saying in these passages, He says, if you marry them, they will turn your heart away from God. Can a holy man, a dedicated Christian, live for God a long time and then turn his back on God? Let's answer that. Let's go to Psalms 127. God says, if you marry them, they will turn your heart from God. So God is very clear in the scriptures that a Christian is to never to marry a non-Christian. So let's see if a Christian can turn his back on God. Or you're at Psalm 127. Who wrote, look right at the very top there. Who wrote Psalm 127? Somebody answer that. Solomon wrote Psalm 127. All right, let's continue to follow Solomon. Let's go to Proverbs. Proverbs is right after Psalms. Look at verse 1. Who wrote the book of Proverbs? Solomon wrote the book of Proverbs. Let's go to Ecclesiastes. That's the next book. Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. Let's look at verse 1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Who is that? That's Solomon. Okay. We see something developing here. Well, let's do one more. Now let's go Ecclesiastes. Let's go to the next one. This one is really easy. The next one is the book, the Song of Solomon. Who wrote it? Solomon. All right, now here we have Solomon built the temple, right? He wrote part of the book of Psalms. He wrote Proverbs. He wrote Ecclesiastes. And he wrote the Song of Solomon. Now, let's follow his life. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 11. Let's see what happens to this great godly man. Let's read 1 Kings chapter 11, the first 4 verses. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh, which is Egypt. He married Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, Hittite women, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the sons of Israel, you shall not associate with them, neither shall they associate with you, for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods. Solomon held fast to these in love. And he had 700 wives, princesses, 300 concubines, and his wives turned his heart away. For it came about when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away at other gods, and his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had done. God said, don't do it. They'll turn your hearts away from God. Now here's a man that has written parts or all of 4 books in the Bible. And then in his old age, he is worshiping gods of the foreign countries. He has turned his back on God. This is as far as we're going to go today in today's message. But the Lord is saying, if we do not keep our hands clean, our hearts clean, our minds clean, we will turn our back on God and we will fall in love with things that we have no business falling in love with. Don't you think this is the problem of the American church? Those who have dropped out of church, they are in love with gods that they have no business being in love with. And God is continually saying to us, don't turn to them. Don't enjoy them. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. All right, our next hymn, 668.